the bell icon to turn on notifications.
We've made the accompanying exercise files for this tutorial available for free. Just click the link below in the video details to get these.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Data Analytics in Excel course. I am Umar Manzar, and I have over 14 years of experience in organizations all over the world. Throughout my career, I have been involved in data analytics and financial management processes for companies in various sectors, spanning from software as a service, or SaaS for short, to banking. I am currently working as a full-time freelancer, and my clients range from startups to large multinational corporations. In my experience, when someone mentions data analytics, people start to think of complicated concepts that they will not be able to grasp. I am here to demystify the topic of data analytics and show you that you do not need to have a PhD to analyze data. I have designed this course around the most fundamental concepts of Excel. If you lead an organization or work to support the decision-making process of organizations, you are often faced with overwhelming amounts of data. You need to process that data to decide what should be done next. The data needs to be processed using spreadsheet software such as Microsoft Excel. Think of Microsoft Excel as a tool that can solve your data analysis worries. With that promise in mind, let's get started. But first, let's discuss what data analytics actually means. Data is pervasive. It's collected every time someone buys something, takes a flight, clicks on an ad, or likes a social media post. So organizations have never had more access to it. But having access to data isn't enough for a business to be successful. It also needs employees who know how to handle, analyze, and interpret the data. Welcome to the world of big data. In this world of big data, basic data literacy, which means being able to analyze, interpret, and even question data, is a skill that is becoming more and more valuable. This is where data analytics comes in. Data analytics helps us question and analyze data. Through the application of data analytics, you can learn about your customers and predict future trends. There are a lot of expensive software packages in the market. Some of you might be surprised to hear that good old Excel is very effective in analyzing data as well. If you've spent countless hours trying to make sense of data without making any significant progress, you have come to the right place. This course will get you started on understanding Excel features and help you in applying these features to easily analyze data. I promise this is not a long list. In order to succeed in this course, you need to have a basic knowledge of mathematics and statistics. You need to have a basic understanding of spreadsheets. Having a recent version of Excel will be beneficial. Excel 365 works best. And lastly, patience to go through the material and a desire to learn will go a long way. This is how the course is structured. In section 1, we will be discussing what data analytics is, and I will give you a refresher of the Excel layout. In section 2, we will have a look at how to use Excel spreadsheets to analyze data. We will discuss a number of concepts such as data entry, formatting data types, formula basics, and Excel functions. Section 3 will explore the importance of cleaning and managing data. We will discuss why data quality is important and how do we manage data inconsistencies. In section 4, we will discuss the various useful functions that Excel has to offer. We will go through how to sort and filter data, tackle complicated data sets, work with pivot tables and Excel charts. Finally, in section 5, we will discuss the what-if analysis, scenario management, and several useful functions of a very useful Excel add-in called Analysis Toolpak. However, please note that the Analysis Toolpak has several advanced statistical tools such as ANOVA and t-tests, which are beyond the scope of this course. Please remember to make use of the exercises in this course. We have one exercise for sections 2, 3, 4, and 5. Please also make use of the Excel workbooks that come with this course. You can use the unsolved workbook to work alongside me as we go through the modules, and you can check your solutions against the solved workbook that is provided with this course. Now that we have discussed the course requirements and the course content, it's time to get started. I look forward to our association throughout this course. Let's quickly review each of the parts that make up Excel, starting off with the ribbon. All Microsoft products use the ribbon, a tabbed interface, albeit the tabs vary depending on the product. The tasks that are utilized the most frequently will be on the Home tab. Depending on your demands, you can modify your search. It's much simpler to come up here to the search box and type the task you're trying to do if you can't find what you're looking for in any of these tabs. For instance, merge and center cells. If you type in merge and center, these are some of the options and the suggested actions that I get. The ribbons, icons, and the actions are also included here. You will also notice that there are quite a few arrows all over the ribbon. These become more apparent as you move through the ribbon. When you click on every arrow, you can see the various options that you get. Here are various additional arrows and actions I can do. Some of these we will be discussing later. The only tab in this tabbed interface that is not used is the File tab. And when I click on it, I'm brought to a page where I can make a brand new blank workbook or a file. I can either save the one I'm working on, open an existing one. By selecting the left pointing arrow at the top of the screen, you can go back to Excel. Let's navigate to the screen's bottom by scrolling down. Although this file might include more than one worksheet, I can only see the one that is currently chosen. We will also discuss that later. I can zoom out or I can zoom in, making the font smaller or larger. Let's move to the screen center. I can navigate through these rows by scrolling all the way down. The rows are all numerical, while the columns at the very top are all alphabetical. Any of these cells can be clicked. We'll go through data types and talk about why text alignment can alternate between left and right. The entire text can be formatted, and we'll go over how to do that. Additionally, by clicking on the column header for a column or a number for a row, you can highlight the entirety of either a column or a row. In order to make something broad or narrow, you can easily adjust the width for both columns and rows. For example, if you want to make column B a little broad, you just move the mouse over and it makes it broader. The same process can be done for rows. If you want to undo something that you have mistakenly done, you can click on the back arrow on the top left corner of the screen. You will regularly use Excel's undo tool. The last action you took will be reversed if you click on it. You can click on it repeatedly or reverse your actions endlessly. The number of activities you can undo is up to 100. In truth, you can undo something if you unintentionally undo something by clicking the redo button, which is the arrow underneath this button. So there you have it, the basics of Excel navigation. You may typically use your daily tasks by adhering to the Home ribbon tab. Everything from formatting to alignment to numbers to cells will be covered in this tab. Let's now discuss how to create, open, and save a file. Even though this new blank file is open, I can create a new one at any time. I can always choose File, then New Blank Workbook in the top left corner of the screen. By tapping More Templates, I may view a list of templates if I don't want to create a brand new blank one. I can view all of Microsoft's templates if I scroll down. Examples include fitness vision, personal budget, volunteer assignments, retirement planner. There is a lot of variety when it comes to Excel templates. By selecting the button labeled Search for Online Templates, I can hunt for a template if I can't find one. I can always make a blank file by clicking the enormous New Blank Workbook icon if I still can't find what I'm looking for. I can now start entering text into the cell because it will open a new empty file. By pressing the Enter key or Tab keys, I can switch to a different row or column. I'll return to File and choose Save As when I'm ready to save the file. Clicking Browse will open the PC's Browse dialog, where I may store it to a location like Documents if I wish to save it locally on my computer. At any point, I may open a file by going back to the File menu, Open. By selecting a push pin icon, I can move an item that I use regularly to the top of this list. As a result, I can now find any file I need by going to the Pinned tab and double-clicking on it. I've started a new blank file, and I'd like to discuss the structure of an Excel file before entering some text. The first thing I'll do is zoom in so that you see what I'm doing a little better. And I'll do that by clicking the plus sign all the way down to the bottom right of the screen. You've probably heard me refer to this as an Excel file, and you probably will, but it's important to note that the technical term for what this is an Excel workbook. It's a workbook comprised of sheets or worksheets. This is sheet 2, as you can see over here. I can enter my data and add multiple sheets here. When I click a new sheet, we have a completely separate worksheet within this workbook, which is the Excel file. I can refer to these sheets in a variety of ways. I can use formulas on one that refer to the cell on another sheet. I can use all of them interchangeably, and we'll go over the details a little later. Although you can call this file or a workbook, the official term is an Excel workbook. So now that we've opened our file, let's begin populating it with some basic text and filling out some columns and rows. I'm going to enter some product data for a fictional company called XYZ360. To begin, I could place my cursor in any cell by directly clicking on it. And if I look, I'm currently in column A, row 1. A1 is the cell number, as you can see over here. If I ever get lost and don't know where I am, I can see that this is cell A1 all the way on the top left-hand side of the screen in the name box. For the time being, I'll place my cursor in cell A5 and begin typing. I'll press enter to move the cursor to the next row, and then I can resume typing. GPS trackers. Let me just press enter. I add cameras. I add SIM cards. Okay, so here we have some products. Now the data in column A is taking up some space in column B. Column B does not contain the data. It's simply too long and I can't see what's in column B. We'll go over how to resize these in more detail later, but for now, I'm going to hover my mouse between columns A and B and slide the mouse over. I'll move my cursor to cell B5 and begin typing. Instead of pressing the enter key, which would take me to the next row, I'm going to press the tab key, which will take me to the next column. And now I have some information over here. This was a quick refresher module as we discussed the Excel ribbon, creating, opening, and saving Excel files. We also entered some text in an Excel workbook. Hope you found it helpful. Since 2019, Microsoft has continued to expand on the data types you can utilize to get real-time information. You can access the data types option by going under the data tab and hitting the more button, and you get a list of options. Now, currently, Microsoft is offering stocks, currencies, and geography. There are a number of other data types as well, such as locations, medical, space, yoga, universities, and so on. Now, how exactly do we link this data type to the internet to get real-time information? So I have a few subsets of data over here where we have a list of countries, list of companies, and a list of cities. So let's see how we can get real-time information on these data sets. Let me highlight the countries first. And if I go in the data tab, I select the data type as automatic. Let's see what happens. Excel is working its magic. And now you see an icon before each and every country. And if I select the icon for Denmark, I get this information, which includes the full name, the nationality, internet code, and so on. I also get information about the geography, what's the capital city. I get information around demographics just with the click of a button. I get economic information as well. And there are a number of other pieces of information I can gather with the click of a button. Now let me select the entire data set again, and let me click the Insert Data button that appears after selecting the list. I have a number of options available. Let's say I'm interested in getting the country code of each and every country. I'll hit this button and I get the country codes. So let me call this column country code. If I select the list again, and this time I'm interested in finding the flags for every country. I get the flags just like that. And let's try one other option. Let's say I'm interested in getting the GDP of every country, and I get the GDP of each and every country as well. So rather than doing a search for each and every country separately on the internet, you can just link the data to the internet and get real-time information. Similarly, we have a list of companies over here. So if I go back in my data tab, go to the data types, and I select the stock option over here, it's going to convert my data set into stocks. Let's see what happens. So it was able to associate every company to a stock symbol other than Ford. So let me select Ford manually over here. And now I have a ticker symbol for each and every company. Let's see the options that I get for stock data. I get the percentage change. I get the number of employees. Let's say I'm interested in finding the number of employees for every company. So I'll just hit this button. It takes a bit of time, but then it populates. Alibaba has 245,700 employees in our data set. Let's look at one other option. Let's try it again. So if I go back in my insert data option, let's say I'm interested in finding the percentage change in stock price over the past 1 day for our data set. I'll just remove the field error on this cell because there's no associated stock name. So I get the percentage change for this data set. Let me add another column here to have some partition between the data sets. My last data set is listing some cities. So I'll select this data set. I'll go in the data types option and I'll select this as cities. Excel is smart enough to identify that there are a number of cities named London in the world. So Excel is asking me which city am I interested in. Let me select London, the capital of United Kingdom. Same with Washington. I'll just select the first one over here, Paris. I'm interested in the capital of France. I'm interested in the German Berlin. So I get all these cities. Let's see what options I get for cities. So I'm interested in the city population. So I get the population over here. London has over 8.6 million inhabitants, followed by Berlin with 3.5 million. Let's try something else. Let's say this time I'm interested in finding the nicknames of each city. I'll hit the nicknames button. So this is the nicknames column. This time around, Excel was not able to find a nickname for Budapest and Washington, so let me just remove that. That's okay. Seems like they don't have a nickname. But all the other cities, so London is known as the Big Smoke, Paris is the City of Lights and City of Love. Berlin also has two nicknames, Athens on the Spree and the Parted City. It's nicknamed the Parted City because of the Berlin Wall. This gives you an idea of how interesting the data types tool is in Excel. The recently introduced data types functionality in Excel is a very interesting tool. In my opinion, it elevates the status of Excel from a mere spreadsheet to an information powerhouse. Gone are the days when you have to Google for every piece of information you're looking for. You can simply get the information in real time using the data types functionality. However, please note that Excel might not be able to find all the information that you're looking for, but it does a really good job in most instances. Feel free to explore this functionality yourself. Data entry is one of the most basic things we do in Excel, and it can be tedious at times. But there are some techniques, shortcuts, and a feature called autofill that will greatly assist. Before we begin, let's open our Excel workbook. We are in module 201. There's a slider bar with a black rectangle in the lower right-hand corner. You can zoom in or out by holding down the left mouse button. We're only going to use about 7 columns as we will create a small little worksheet. So let's just zoom in a bit. Let me enter some information in cell A3. I can use the arrow keys or click on A3 and make that cell the active one, and I type revenue. Have you noticed it's on the left hand side of the cell? Unless you type values, that is what automatically happens in Excel. Moving down a column, I'll type in costs and then hit enter and profit. Enter. Later on, I decide to change the word costs to expenses. I'll click there. We don't need to erase it. I'll simply type over it. To edit a cell, either click on it and then go into the formula bar, click in the appropriate spot and make some changes, or double click near the entry to do the editing directly in the cell. I'm going to enter some numbers. The number I'm going to type is 80, and I accidentally typed O instead of 0. Have you noticed that on the keyboard they're right next to each other? I tab over 130, correctly typing this one, tab, and you can see the difference. When entering numbers in Excel, they're always right aligned. Let's just go through this again. 80. If it is not purely numerical or a formula, Excel will left align it, whereas numbers are always right aligned. Okay, I'm going to enter 4 numbers and then press the tab as I move to the right here. So I'll type 225, tab 300, tab 325, tab 500, and then press enter after the last entry. Then 6 more numbers here. And then after the last one, press enter. I'm going to put monthly names across the top. So I'll start by typing January, and then I tab over. Now let me give you a time-saving tip. It's an autofill shortcut. When you have a month spelled out or a 3-letter abbreviation, you can point to the fill handle in the lower right-hand corner of that cell. Take note of how the mouse pointer changes shape and becomes thinner. I'm dragging across while holding down the left mouse button. The little pop-ups below hint at what's to come. You will get the remaining months. We can drag on until December and then it'll start over. Or we can leave it as is. We can also accomplish this in a variety of ways. You may begin with any month and may use a 3-letter abbreviation. So let me type in OCT, and then I'll point to the lower right-hand corner and click and drag. You've probably already guessed what we are about to see. The same thing happens if you drag right. We can go downwards. You get used to this feature pretty quickly. It also works with the weeks of the year. We can also use the letter Q and the number 1 in a variety of ways. Q means quarter in financial terms. So if I just type in Q1 over here and I drag downwards, it goes all the way to Q4. Remember, there are 4 quarters in a year. You can also go rightwards. Of course, these are frequently used for columns and row headings. So these are pretty useful techniques. Let's look at another example. So we have another data set over here. If we want to delete some data, we can simply place the cursor inside the cell and press the delete key. You can also delete entire columns by highlighting the columns you want to delete, and you can hit delete. You can clear everything by pressing the delete key. If you click over here and you hit the delete key, it's going to delete everything. When we talk about columns and rows, we'll learn how to handle all of that. I'm just making sure you understand how to delete data from cells right now. You can now copy data from cells as well. The simplest method is to use your keyboard shortcut. I'll start by copying everything. So let me select everything over here. Then I'll press the Control and C key. And then I'll hit the Control and V key to paste. And now I have a completely new copy of everything. Let's just reverse that. Another thing you can do is drag data. It can be much easier and faster at times. I'll select all of my text. And if I slowly move my cursor to the right edge of the data set, you might notice that the cursor changes to a crosshair. And all I have to do now is slide the data around. I could put it wherever I want. Maybe I'll just move it down a few rows. I can let go and everything will move. I can also slide it over and everything moves again. I'd like to tell you about a specific situation. In this data set, we have a very simple formula in column E, which is just adding these two numbers together for every line. When we copy everything, it preserves the formula. And when we paste it anywhere we want, the formula is going to be preserved. But if I just copy this column and paste it, everything is blank. The formula doesn't work because your data will be considered absolute at times and your formulas will be considered relative at others. That is, they will be locked into where they are in a sheet at times and will move around at other times. In these cases, we can just paste the value of the formula's end result in because I don't really care about the formula. We're just moving data around. So I'll copy this data set and I'll paste it here as values. If there's a formula in a data set, and if we need to move the data set around, it's always best to copy and paste the data as values. So if we go in paste special over here, you have a paste values feature. So you click on that and there we go. All right. In this module, we went through the concepts of viewing and entering data in Excel. We also discussed how to copy and delete data, autofill and moving data using the crosshair cursor functionality can help save loads of time, especially when you are drowning in work. When it comes to formatting the appearance of an Excel spreadsheet, there are no rules. It depends on the type of data, who it is for, and how much time you have to devote to formatting it. There are numerous reasons. Let's have a look at a data set that we discussed in the previous module. Let's copy it across. And let's try to format it. So what we see over here is we have revenue and expenses for the months from January through June. So the first thing that we can do over here is we can type in financial data over here in cell A2. And in the font section, you will see that we have a number of options. So we can make it bold, we can italicize the text, and even underline it if we need to. The other thing is when we talk about formatting cells, it needs to look neat. So we can select all the months and we can align it by using the options that we have over here. If I click on this option, make sure the data is in the center of the cell. If I click on this option, it's going to align to the left side. We can even middle align the data set. So it really depends on what works for you and how does the data look on a spreadsheet. I usually prefer to center align the data, especially when we are looking at financial data. We can also make the data bigger or smaller. So if I select these line items, I can change the font size. I can make it smaller as well. And we can also change the color of the font. We can make it blue or orange or gray. So we have a number of options at our disposal. We can even color the cells. So let's go with this option for now. Let me share another interesting feature of Excel. You don't need to format the data by clicking on each and every cell. You can format the entire row by selecting the row number. So let's say we want to format row number 4. We can change the color of the text in this row and we can make it red. And for revenue, we can change it to green. So the entire row of data updates based on what you want to do. It's also worth spending some time on the merge and center functionality. So let me copy and paste this data set over here. And instead of typing financial data in cell A8, I want to make sure that it's merged across these highlighted cells because at the end of the day, the data underneath is all financial data. So what I can do is I can select the cells where I want the financial data to be merged across. I go in the merge and center option and I click merge across. So as you can see, this data set is now merged, but in order to make it look a little nicer, I can center align it, and there you go. This looks much better than this. It's far clearer. Let's now talk about the Excel data types and why they are important. This is an excellent example because it contains a wide range of data types. We have text, we have numbers, we have dates, and we even have some formulas. When you enter data into a cell, Excel does an excellent job of determining which data type to use. For instance, if I type in a word, let me type my own name, UMAR, I'll press the enter key and the text will remain it's left aligned. This indicates that it is simply treating it as a text string. However, notice when I enter a number, I'll press the enter key and the text will remain to the right. That is how Excel determines whether the field is a number or a value. That is, a date, an integer, a time, a currency, or any other type of value that isn't a straight text field. It's significant because it determines what kind of formula or function you can perform on that cell. For example, if I go to the Formulas ribbon, let me click on this cell and go to the Formulas ribbon. We have a number of options available. If I go in the Financial Formulas, these are all the formulas that I can perform using this data set. We can also perform various functions on text, such as transforming text directly in a cell. You can perform calculations using date and time data as well. But Excel must understand what type of data set it's dealing with. And that's why the alignment within a cell helps Excel determine the data set. Let's look at these dates over here. Dates can be entered in a variety of ways. So let me type in a date, for example. As you can see, it's perfectly centered. In fact, if I go over to the formula bar, I can see that the date has been expanded. I have the year, I have the month, and I have the day. Excel will adjust the dates based on the locale you have selected. So let me look at a time as well. We can also enter time in a variety of ways. Let's say I enter 17:55 p.m. As you can see, it's right aligned once more. And if I look at the formula bar, we see the PM after the time. You always have the option of selecting and formatting the data cell that you want. So let's highlight this field over here. So amount. Let me go to the Home ribbon tab. And over here, we can see that the formatting is set to general. This denotes the number format, and currently it's set to general. I can easily change it to currency, and the entire data set converts to currency automatically. I can also change the number of decimals used. Currently, the data shows 2 decimal places. If I click on this button, it will increase the number of decimals, and clicking on the decrease decimal button is going to decrease the number of decimals. If you look at this column, the days since issue, there are some formulas in here, but these are very simple formulas. This cell, for example, denotes the number of days since the ticket number was issued. It's a simple formula that subtracts today's date from the value in this cell when the ticket number was issued. And these are the types of calculations that can be performed when the type is properly set. So keep an eye out in the back of your mind for anything that doesn't seem right. For example, I just typed in time, but it's left aligned. So it seems that Excel has not recognized that I was putting in time. However, if I put in a space over here, it's going to be right aligned again. Excel recognizes that it is indeed time and adjusts accordingly. We have a number of options available to format data and ensure that it's readable. We can also save valuable time if we understand the different data types and format accordingly. Formula writing is one of the most common things that Excel users do. Now, most formulas are clear, easy to understand, and simple to use, but they begin with an idea that might be new to you. On this sheet, we want to figure out how much money we made. So in January, if we subtract the expenses from the revenue, we're going to get the profit. So it's going to be 77 minus 47, and we get 30. In Excel, if we have a look at the formula, all formulas start with an equal sign. We can and sometimes do use external numbers, but most of the time we use addresses. In effect, we want to say that whatever is in B4 should be subtracted from B3. So we write the formula, And this is one of the three main ways to write a formula. We type the location of the first cell, B3, minus B4. We press Enter or Tab, and we have our answer. Another way to type this, so let me just delete it, is to use the arrow keys to get to the cell you want. This could be a better way to write a formula, but the cells have to be close together. So let's see how this works. So let's press equal, then we use the arrow key. We go up to B3, then I press minus, and we use the arrow key again to go up to B4. Press enter. We get the same answer, 30. And the third way, which might take two hands, is firstly to type equal, then we click on cell B3, type minus, then click on cell B4, press enter. We get the same solution in all three cases. No matter how you write the formula, you should learn to keep an eye on what we call the formula bar. This is the formula bar over here. You can see it at the top of the screen. In a way, the cell doesn't really have a number, it has a formula instead. We keep an eye on the formula bar, much like we keep an eye on a rear view mirror when we are driving. We look at it often. Now we need a total in cell N3. If everything we knew about the formula came from what we had seen before, we would do something like this. Equal, let's click on B3, then add C3, then add D3, and so on. But it's not the best way to do it. Think about trying to do that for the entire year. Or if you had a lot more columns of data, simply press escape. Excel has hundreds of functions that come with it. A lot of them exist. You can find them this way on the ribbon's Formula tab. So we have some financial functions, some logical functions, text, data and time. The options are virtually endless. Most people probably use sum the most when they use Excel. And just like a formula, this starts with the word equal, and then we type sum, S-U-M, and there's no need to capitalize it. Then we have left parenthesis, and then we select the cells in question by dragging from left to right. So I want the sum of these columns over here. All the cells from B3 are now included. Then we press enter, and just like that, the answer comes up. In cell O3, we need to figure out the average. That is, of course, the total number divided by 12, as we have 12 months over here. We need to add up all of these, but the addition has already been done right here. So the formula in the average column is just equal. Then we click on this cell, divided by 12, and press enter. Please note that the division sign is the slash, which looks like this, and not the one that goes the other way. Now, when we have formulas set up like this, if I change a number, for example, let me make this 87, notice how the profit and the total and average changes. Have a look at it again. Let me change the number to 97. The numbers in these columns change. And that's how you can start to see how dynamic these formulas are and how we can change them depending on the situation. Also, if I go back to cell B4, let me change something else over here. So the 47, let me make that 57. The number changes. We don't have anything on the right yet, so it won't change anything over here. But sometimes we see negatives, and that's what happens. When you see a formula in Excel, you may want to duplicate it in adjacent cells, either across a row or down a column. So there is a formula in cell B5. If I double click on it, we'll see what's happening. And copying a formula in Excel it's important to remember that you're copying a formula relatively. So let me just copy the formula from here. So I'll press Ctrl+C, formula is copied, and let me just paste it over here to Ctrl+V. I paste the formula by pressing Ctrl and V on my keyboard. Now let's see what happened in the formula. So I have moved one column to the right, and the column reference has changed from column B to column C. If I keep copying the formula across, the references will be changed to column D, E, F, and so on. You see, if you copy a formula, it is adjusted relative to the original. Otherwise, you would be repeating the exact same formula, which does not quite help us. And of course, the benefit is we don't want to type a formula here, then here, then here. Imagine if you have to do this for every day in a year. That would be ridiculous and time consuming. And we can simply copy a formula by dragging and entering it from the lower right corner. This is referred to as the fill handle. As I drag to the right from the fill handle, you'll notice that these values are correct right away. So in May, it's 21 minus 28, which is minus 7. So one by one, we've got the right formulas. And if we had even more columns, you can imagine how time efficient and better it would be by just copying the formula across using the fill handle. Similarly, now in column N, we need to calculate the totals. So if you look at column N3, we are summing all 12 months. So the formula is working on the 12 cells to its left. So if we just drag this formula across, we are mimicking this relationship for the other two rows as well. So for expenses, the formula over here is working on the 12 columns to the left, and same for the profit row. The basic concept is the same, but I'm moving down a column. Similarly, the average function is the cell to its left divided by 12. We want to do it again for the other two rows. So I'm going to go on the cell, wait for the fill handle, and I'm going to drag it downward using my mouse. If you remember, the worksheet originally began with very few formulas, and we have added more formulas by dragging the fill handle downwards or across. The list of numbers on the screen appears to be a random collection of numbers at first glance. The rest are all formulas and not numbers. You'll need to copy formulas as you work with Excel, as demonstrated in the examples in this video. In this module, we have seen how to use the mouse and keyboard in different ways to make simple formulas. Once you have created a formula, copying and pasting it enables you to save a lot of time, especially when you're dealing with a very large data set. Once you have created a formula, dragging it using the fill handle enables you to save a lot of time, especially when you're dealing with a very large data set. You can use Excel's most common functions, sum and average, to add up numbers in a column or a row, or find the average of those numbers. Now, you can use these functions with the help of a menu button or shortcut keys. We'll be exploring that further. What we see over here is a worksheet with numbers. Let's say in cell N3, we want to add the revenue from January through December. So how do we go about doing that? You may have seen in a previous module that we can start by typing equal sum, left parenthesis, highlight the data, and so on. But there is a better way, a faster way, or even two faster ways in fact. Firstly, you can find the AutoSum button in the editing group on the right hand side of the Home tab. When you click on this button, Excel looks up for data and then it looks leftward. No numbers show up above it, but they do show up to the left. When we click this button, Excel tells us what it's going to do and we press enter. After you've used it a few times, you'll feel more comfortable with it and be able to speed it up a bit. We can double click on AutoSum to do this as well. So let's see how that works. Let me delete this. Click, click, and there we go. So what did we get out of this? As a reminder, we can see what it did if I double click this cell. You can also see it in the formula bar in cell N3. So it's summing B3 to M3. We can apply the same concept over here in cell B10. I click AutoSum twice. Now let's say we want to add these cells over here. So I can highlight the data over here and press Alt and equal from my keyboard. And that's another quick way of adding the numbers up. Let's do it again. So I delete this. I highlight the cells that I want to add and I press Alt and equal. And the sum of these four numbers is 954 that we see over here. If we go on the AutoSum button again, you will see that there are various options. We have sum, we have average, count numbers, max, min, and there are some more functions as well. So if we change this to average, you will see that automatically Excel can now calculate averages. So the average of these four cells is 239. Let's apply the same approach over here. I select average and then I press enter. And there we go. The average is 79.5 for these 12 numbers on the left hand side. There's one more thing that I would like to tell you. You should never type SUM in a cell. Why is that? Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay to type SUM, but when you press Alt equal in Excel, it automatically types SUM for you. And you can change the ranges based on what you want to do. So if we want to add these three numbers together, by pressing Alt and equal, I get SUM and I just change the range. So why type SUM when you can just press Alt equal and Excel does it for you? So these are useful tools for working with formulas in Excel. There's no question that most Excel users use the sum and average functions a lot. Let's explore another commonly used function in Excel. If we scroll downwards, we'll see that there is another data set where we have the employee first name, employee ID, department, and the breakdown of the total salary by month. If you're just starting out with Excel, you might not need it right away, but you probably will at some point. It is called VLOOKUP. It works with another function called HLOOKUP, and as of August 2019, VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP will be replaced by a new function called XLOOKUP. And the whole point of this kind of function is to let you gather information that is related. You may be working on more than one worksheet at the same time as you do this. In this example over here, we have some employee data with their total salaries. And you can imagine it to be a very large data set with thousands of rows of data. And what we need to do is to find the first names based on the employee IDs. So if we use the XLOOKUP function, it will make things much easier. In addition to combining the features of VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, XLOOKUP makes some new improvements and gets around some of the problems that we have had with the other two. I'm going to type equal X lookup left parenthesis. And if you have never done anything but sum and average, you might be surprised by what you find. If you type in the name of the function and add a left parenthesis, you might get a hint about what you need to do. And if you want, some extra features that are between the brackets. When you type in XLOOKUP, basically what you're trying to do is, I have a value like the one over here. So I'll click on the lookup value. Then I need to identify a lookup array. So that will be the employee ID column. So I'll select all of it. And then I will type in a return array. So if we want to find the first name, that's in column A. So I'll select the entire column A where you have all these rows of data. And that's it. Right parenthesis, enter. So the first name of the employee with ID 12 is Florian. So we can drag down this formula, and this is what we get. But what happened here? We are getting an error. And why would that be? If we look closely at the formula, you see that these ranges are dynamic. So the ranges are changing as you drag the formula downwards. If in cell T23 we had B22 to B98, by scrolling downwards, we are at B23 and B99. And if we click on the formula again, the range has an empty row that it's looking into, which is not correct. In a nutshell, you want to make these ranges static. So what we can do is, if we go back to the original formula in cell T23, we click on the range and we press F4 from our keyboard. So you'll have these dollar signs. You do the same over here, press F4, and the same for this range and the next range. And there we go. Now drag the formula down and you don't get any errors. So ID number 12 is Florian. We can do a quick check. Yeah, that's correct. That's Florian, ID number 12. Sanchez, ID number 6. That's Sanchez, ID number 6. So we have easily populated the first names by looking up the IDs. Now let's do another example together. So we need to find out the total salaries and we just have the IDs. So I'll just start by typing in equals X lookup left parenthesis. Then I'll click on the lookup value. Then the lookup array, which is this column over here. I'll select the whole array. And then I need to find the return array, which is the total salary. So I'll select the total salary. Right parenthesis, enter. Let's make these ranges static by clicking F4. I press enter again. And I'll just drag the formula down. So these are the total salaries of the employees with these IDs. In this module, we discussed some more time-saving Excel techniques. We explored the AutoSum and Alt plus equal keyboard shortcuts to sum a set of numbers automatically. We also explored XLOOKUP, which is a far more powerful function of Excel when compared with the more commonly used HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP functions. Values like interest rates or other percentages can be put right into a formula, but almost always it's better to get a value from a cell in your worksheet. Putting a value in a cell instead of putting it in a formula makes the value visible and lets you change it without having to change the formula. So in this module, I'll show you how to use cell references. We have a spreadsheet over here with monthly revenues from January through December for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. And we need to fill in the revenue numbers based on some requirements that have been laid out. Let's say I want to show the value of a particular cell. In this case, we need to find how much money was made in January 2021. So when I look at my list, I can tell that the value is in cell C4. I will go back to cell F4 and type my formula there. In this case, you only need to do three things. The first thing I need to do is type an equal sign to show that I'm making a formula. Then I'll click on 258, 421 as a reference in cell C4 and press enter. This is the value in cell C4, and that's what we need. If I want to use more than one value, I can choose the cells. Let's say I want to find the total for quarter 4. That's between October and December. In F5, I'll type an equal sign, then SUM, which stands for the function sum, followed by a left parenthesis, and then I simply go in my data set and select the cells relevant for Q4, that is October through December. And hit enter. If you notice at the cell closely, there's also an error indicator because I didn't include all of the values around the ones I chose. But you don't need to worry about that. I can do the same thing with Q1 and Q4. I'll begin by typing equals SUM, left parenthesis. I select Q1, that is January through March, right parenthesis. So I've selected cells B4 to B6. I can type in a comma, and then I'll select the Q4 months, that is October through December. Right parenthesis, enter. If you look at the formula closely, you can see that I have two ranges. Each are highlighted in a different color and separated by a comma. To calculate the total revenues for the entire 2020, let me show you a quick way of doing this. I'll begin by typing in equals SUM, left parenthesis. I'll select cell B4 and I'll press Control, Shift, and down arrow to quickly select the entire data set. Enter. And the total revenue for 2020 was in excess of 4.2 million. This technique saves time because you don't have to drag the formula using your mouse. Last but not the least, I can also choose values from a horizontal range. Let's say I wanted to know how much revenue have we made in the month of September for 2020 and 2021. So I'll click on the empty cell over here and I'll start by typing equals SUM, left parenthesis. I'll click on cell B12, which is the month of September for 2020, and I'll drag this across. Enter. Let's now discuss what happens when you copy formulas and show you how to use relative and absolute references to keep track of what changes and what doesn't. You got a glimpse of that in the previous module, and we'll discuss it some more in this module as it's really important. If we scroll down below, we have some headcount related information for a global corporation. This workbook tells me that this corporation had 21,020 employees. The projected growth rate is 3% from 2016 till 2024. So what would be the headcount numbers from 2016 through 2024? If I want to make that formula, I will start by clicking on cell B25. I'll type in the equal sign. I'll select my starting headcount amount, which is 21,020 in B24, and I'll put in an extra 3% on top of the initial amount. So I'll do plus, I'll type B24 again, multiplied by the growth rate of 3%, right parenthesis, enter. So in 2016, the headcount number would be 21,651. Let's say I want to drag the formula in cell B25 till cell B33. To do this, I will click on cell B25 and then grab the fill handle at the bottom right corner of that cell. It looks like a small square. I will just drag down the formula to copy it, and I get something I did not expect. If there are a lot of number signs, there is a mistake. In this case, the value won't fit into the width of column B as it is now. I know that's not right because the numbers in cell B26 till B33 should be around the 22,000 mark because the formula should simply add a 3% growth rate on the ending value of the previous cell. So if I click on cell B26, let's see what's happening over here. We have the starting value, which is correct. I want to add the growth rate on top of the starting value. So if I see what's happening here, it takes B25 again, which is fine, and it's multiplying it by the original head count rather than the growth rate. So it seems by dragging the formula down, the ranges have changed. So how can we fix that? We first correct the formula by selecting the growth rate, and I'll hit F4 using my keyboard, and you'll see some dollar signs appearing, which makes this range static. I'll press enter, and this looks much better now. The head count in 2017 is 22,300. So by hitting F4, the ranges are absolute. But there's something else I wanted to show you. If I hit F4 again, there's just $1 sign before row number 23. So this makes the row static. If I hit it once more, there's a dollar sign before column B. So this is making the column static. If I press it once more, the dollar signs disappear and the range is not static anymore. So in a nutshell, you have a lot of flexibility here, but you need to be sure what you want to do. Do you want to make the column static or the row? For now, let's make both the row and the column static. So I'll hit F4 again. And there we go. We are back to 22,300. And now, if I drag the formula down till cell B33, the numbers look much better and the formulas are working. And by just glancing at the data, you will note that the formula is indeed correct and it's working. In this module, we took a deep dive into the absolute and relative references. Remember, in Excel, it's not just about typing in formulas. It's about working with addresses when we talk about formulas. You can save a lot of time using the F4 button on your keyboard, especially if you're working with large data sets. Time for an exercise. This exercise will have two parts. In the first part, we need to identify the employee ID and the department from table 1, in which we have the employee ID, department, and the employee name. And we need to identify the ID and the department using XLOOKUP. That's the first part of the question. In the second part, we have the initial investment amount and we have the investment rate. And we see that the formula has been applied to cell B52 and B53. But then from cell B54 onwards, there seems to be an error. So we need to look into the formula and correct it. Please pause this video if you do not want to watch the answer right away. Starting off with the first question, let's use the employee name to determine the ID and the department. We just need to know how the XLOOKUP formula works. So we'll begin by typing equals XLOOKUP. We're going to select the employee name as the lookup value. Then for the lookup array, we are going to select the column with the employee name in our table. And for ID, the return array should be the employee ID column, which is column A. We're going to close the brackets and we're going to hit enter. And there we go. Before I drag this formula down, I need to lock the cell references. And I can do that by pressing the F4 key on my keyboard. So C7 is locked, C42 is locked, same for A7 and A42. I'll hit enter again. And now I can easily drag it down. So the employee IDs have been filled. Now for the department, I need to apply the XLOOKUP formula again. So I'll type XLOOKUP. I'll select the lookup value as the employee name. I'll select the lookup array as the employee name column. Then for the return array, I'll select the department column. And there we go. Right parenthesis, enter. Before dragging the formula down, I'll lock the cell references again. So I'll press F4 for the cells I want to be locked. I'll drag it down. And now I have the ID and department per employee name. For the second question, let's first have a closer look at the formula. So in 2016, to calculate the final investment amount for 2016, I have the initial investment plus, then I have the initial investment again times the investment rate. So it looks good. In 2017, again, I have the investment amount in 2016 plus the investment amount in 2016 times the investment rate. That's fine as well. So what's happening in 2018 onwards? I have the initial investment amount for 2017, which is correct. Then I have the investment amount for 2017 again, which is correct. And then instead of multiplying it by the investment rate, which is in cell B50, the formula is multiplying it by the initial investment of 1.15 million, which is not correct. So I need to fix this part of the formula. Instead of the formula referring to cell B51, I need it to refer to cell B50. So I'll fix this part of the formula. B51 becomes B50. That's fine now. And then I can drag this formula down and fix the rest of the cells. But before I do that, I need to lock cell B50. So I'll hit F4 and that's it. So the investment amount in 2018 is 1.256 million, which makes sense. And I can easily drag the formula down. And there we go. The error has now been corrected.
For the next section, you'll want to download the course exercise files. Click the link below in the video description to get these. You can also scroll through the details to find timestamps for each section in this course. If you're enjoying this training, please leave us a comment.
Before you start working with lists and Excel, you should be aware of a few guidelines that will help you become more proficient as you consider using sorting, filtering, subtotaling, and possibly pivot tables. In order to utilize the entire Excel toolkit at your disposal, your data needs to meet certain quality standards. Now in this workbook, I have the data over here. I can use some of it. It can be printed. There's a lot that can be done. However, if I try to sort or filter the data as it currently appears, a number of features will not work properly. Let's have a closer look at this data set. In column A, we have the full name. Then we have the office phone number in column C. So it seems that column B is hidden. The date of birth, we have the age. Then column F is empty. We have customer since in column G, which tells us how long has this person been a customer for our company. And then we have the contract value down to 3 decimal places. To begin with cleaning the data, you might notice that row 12 and row 23 are empty. Again, with such a small list, there will be no major issues. But as an example, suppose the list is much longer and there is an empty row every 100 or 300 rows. What if you click in the middle of the data and say to yourself, I want to sort the data? We can immediately see what can go wrong. Let me show you what I mean. Under the Data tab, I go in the Sort option and see what happens. Excel has selected the dataset from column A through E, as column F is empty. So if you sort this data, only columns A through E are going to be sorted, leaving columns G to H static. So that is certainly going to lead to inaccuracies in our data analysis. So first of all, we need to delete empty columns and empty rows wherever they appear. So starting off with column F, let me just delete that. Then let's delete row 12. I select, right click, and I hit the delete option here. Follow the same approach for row 22. Right click, hit the delete option. Now the dataset does not have any empty rows or empty columns. However, one of the columns is hidden. So let me unhide this. I take my cursor where the column is hidden, and then when it changes shape, I unhide it by increasing the width of column B. So after unhiding column B, I notice that there are some notes in here. So if you want to keep the notes as is, that's fine. But there is another note with no associated data in the line. That's row 25. So let me just delete that. And now let's proceed to sort the data again. If I press the sort button over here, it's going to select the entire data set. So this is also a useful tool that can help us determine if Excel is taking the entire data set into consideration. And as you can see over here, the entire data set has been selected. However, looking at this closely, you might notice that the titles have also been selected. Looking closely at the titles, they do appear a little out of the ordinary. That is, you have these titles that are on two lines. You have full and then name. You have office and then phone. You have date and then of birth. This is not a good idea. If you begin working with this data and possibly pivot tables, or if you are about to insert subtitles, Excel may fail to recognize that the titles are in two rows. So we need to put our titles on a single line. In order to consolidate the titles on a single line, let me show you a simple Excel shortcut. If I go on cell A3, I click on it, and after the L of full, I press Alt and the Enter key, and then I type in name. As you can see, by using the Alt and Enter key, I've made sure that the full name is in one cell rather than this being in two cells. And I can just drag it down. I can press OK here. It's been dragged down. So I have full name. I can do the same thing for office phone. So clicking on the office cell, pressing Alt and Enter, and typing in phone. Let me just drag this down as well. Press OK. We can do the same thing for date of birth. Date, Alt and Enter, off, birth, press Enter. Let's drag it down. Repeat the process for the other two columns. Age can be dragged down as is. The notes can be dragged down as well. And we can delete row 3 now as it's blank. So we have now cleaned up the titles. Let me share a few more Excel tips with you. If we take a closer look at the full name column, we may notice that we are limited in our capability, especially if we want to sort the names by last name or by the first name. So how do we clean that up? We can enter a new column by clicking the Insert button. And then over here, I'll just use the same title, full name. And then let's say I want the last name to come first, then a comma, and then the first name, so that there's some more structure to the name convention. So how do I go about doing that? One way would be to just type in the last name, comma, and then the first name for all these cells, but that is going to be very time consuming. There is a very cool Excel shortcut I would like to share with you. So I'll just do the first name. I'll just type in the last name, comma, and then the first name. And rather than just pressing enter, I'm going to hit this Control Enter key, and then under the data options, I'll hit the flash fill button and see what happens. And just like that, the same format of the naming convention has been applied to all the other rows as well. So this is a very good time-saving tip. Now we can just delete the first column. And then if you have a look at the office phone, there are a number of different formats that you see. You have the area code separated in some lines, whereas you have some dashes in between the numbers on others. And some line items are without any spaces or any dashes. So the data in this column is clearly inconsistent. So how do we make this data clean? If we select the entire data set in this column, we go back to the Home tab. And then if you click on this drop down under the Number tab, you will see a number of formatting options. But we don't see a phone number option in this drop down. So I'll click on More Number Formats. I'll go in Special, and you will see that you have a couple of options here. You have the phone number and you have the social insurance number. So if we are working with phone numbers, I select phone number, I hit the OK button, and let's see what happens. Now, most of the numbers are consistent. You didn't have to go through every single cell and re-enter the data. There are a couple that are still not updated. So we can manually update these. So now the phone numbers have also been updated. And now we can look at the contract value. This contract value, it's very difficult to read the numbers in the contract value column because there are no decimals, there are no commas. It's simply not clean enough. So let's say that this contract value is in dollars. How do we fix this data set? With a click of a button. So I select the entire data set and I press the dollar sign under the number tab. Let's see what happens. The data set is now much cleaner, but let's say we want to deal with whole numbers. So I'll select the entire data set again and decrease the number of decimals using this button. And there you go. The data set that we have right now is much cleaner than the data set we started off with. In this module, we discussed the importance of data quality. Remember, Excel is packed with features like AutoSum, sort, and pivot tables. Using data cleaning techniques such as find and replace, number formats, and flash fill, we can clean any data, no matter how large, very quickly. If you work with colleagues who do not have access to Microsoft Excel, you can request that their data be exported to a text file or a comma-separated value file. In this module, I'll show you how to import that data into Excel. There are several methods for saving a text file. The first is to use a comma-separated value file, which is a file that has a comma between each individual value. Excel has the advantage of opening comma-separated files directly. You are under no obligation to import anything else. Let's open up a comma-separated file. I'll go in File, and I'll open that file by going in Open. I'll browse for that file. I'll show you that this file is indeed a comma-separated value file. I select it. I hit the Open button. The file, which was a comma-separated value, has been opened directly in Excel. One thing to keep in mind is that there is no formatting because it is a text file. Column headers may be bold and centered in an Excel file, but not in this one. Let me close this file by hitting the Ctrl and W button on the keyboard and return to our Excel workbook. You can also open a CSV file by going into the Data tab, and then over here you see the Get and Transform Data section. You can hit the Get Data button, and then from there you select From File and you click on From Text CSV. You select the file and you hit the Import button. When I click on that button, the Import Data dialog box appears. You can see I have items, customer name, units, cost price, markup, location, category, and length. And you can see that I have my file origin as well, which in this case is Western European for Windows. A comma acts as a delimiter in this data set, and the data type which has been detected is based on the first 200 rows. There's nothing special in this data set. All I've got are numbers and text. There are no dates or formulas. Now I will hit the load button and the data will be loaded as an Excel table into my worksheet. There you go. There's a separate tab and the data is loaded. The Queries and Connections task pane is also visible on the right. If I go in the Queries tab, I will see that there were 50,000 rows that were loaded. And then in the Connections tab, there are 0 connections. So in other words, I have created a query, but not a direct connection. And now I can work with data just like I would in any other Excel workbook. Please note that when you import data in Excel, you don't just copy the data and then unlink it from the original file. Instead, Excel makes a data connection to the source file. And if you tell it to see if its contents have changed and your worksheet needs to be updated, you can control how Excel updates your worksheet data by displaying the external data ranges property styling box. So let's see how that works. If I go in the data tab, I have the queries and connections section over here. If I go and refresh all and look at the connection properties, this is what I get. So I have the query name, I have the usage. So this table enables a background refresh, which is checked. I also have the option to refresh every 60 minutes and I can change it as needed or as required. I can also refresh the data when opening the file. So there are a number of options over here. I will show you how the refresh functionality in Excel works. Let me just hit OK here. This is our data set. Now, if I open that data set in a separate file and I change a customer name here, the customer name is John Smith. And let's also change the markup to $40 and the length to 1 meter. And if I just close this file, on my original file, if I hit refresh all, as you can see, the data has changed. The length is 1 meter, the markup is $40, and the customer name has changed as well. So by linking your Excel workbook to a data set will ensure that the latest and the most up-to-date data is being included in your data set. You just need to hit the refresh button to make sure you're always dealing with the latest and greatest information. By using the Get and Transform Data functionality in Excel, you create a link to a CSV file. This ensures that whenever the CSV file is updated, your data set in the Excel workbook replicates those changes. This is a very powerful and time-saving technique. In this module, we'll look at some of Excel's advanced formatting options. So we have the last name, first name, email, start date, and age, and around 51 rows of data that you can see over here. I've kept this list short to make it easier to see the two commands we'd be looking at, namely filtering and removing duplicate values. The true power of these two commands will be revealed when you have thousands of rows of data to work with. These tools will help us make sure that our list contains no duplicate information. So if we just have a look at this list, you might notice that there is a duplication on row 4 and row 18. And then we have another duplicate data on row 7 and row 26. Because this is a reasonably short list, just by having a closer look at the data, this becomes apparent. But you might have to deal with very long data sets, and this will become extremely complicated to look at every row of data to make sure there is no duplication. That's where the Excel filtering and removing duplicate functionality comes in. When looking for duplicate data, keep in mind that every single column of data within that row must be identical for Excel to recognize it as a duplicate. So the last name, first name, email, start date, and the age needs to be absolutely identical in another row for Excel to identify as a duplicate record. If anything differs in any of the columns, it will not appear as a duplicate, implying that it must be an exact match. This is another crucial distinction to make between filtering and removing duplicates. When you filter for unique values, you will notice that it only hides the value rather than removing it. So it simply returns a clean list of data, whereas removing duplicate data removes the data from your spreadsheet. This is a far more powerful command than simply looking for values that are unique. So if you want to clean up your list, you start by filtering it and then removing duplicates. This is precisely what we will be doing now. The first step will be to look for filtering for distinct values. So let's make sure that we are on the Data tab in our ribbon, which is selected over here. This will greatly simplify access to the commands that we'll be using. Also, we need to make sure that we have chosen our table by clicking on one of the cells. So we have cell C9 chosen in this data set, so that's fine. We'll go on the advanced option that shows up in the sort and filter category, and we'll click on this. We need to make sure that the correct data set is selected. So that's shown in the list range where it's picking up A3 to E54. Let's have a quick look. Yes, that's correct. It's selecting the entire data set. Now you can either filter the list in place or you can copy to another location. So let's say we want to copy this data set to another location. We'll select this action over here, copy to another location, and then Excel proposes the address where it wants to copy the data. So it's showing up as A57 to E57. We can also change this address by clicking on this button over here. So let's say we are fine to copy the data set over here. So I'll go back. And then we only want unique records. So we'll check this box and we will hit OK. Let's see what happens. So the data set has been populated. Let's count the number of rows. So in the new data set, we have 49 rows of data. And then in the old data set, we have 51 rows of data. So the 2 rows of data that we identified as duplicates have been removed using the advanced filter option. Let's go back to our table, and this time we are going to filter the list in place with unique records only. Let's see what happens. As you can see, row 18 and row 26 has been hidden. It's worth noting that the data hasn't been removed. It still shows the same data, but the rows have been hidden. This is the primary distinction when filtering for unique values while the data is still present. Let's undo the previous command and recreate our list with the duplicate included. So I'll go back to the Home tab. I'll hit the undo button. Let's now try to identify the difference between the advanced filter option and the remove duplicates option. So I will reselect my list. I'll go back to the data tab and I'll hit the remove duplicates button. It asks which columns I want to compare the data set on. I select all 5 columns and I'll click OK. When I hit OK, I'm immediately given my result. So Excel has removed the 2 duplicate values that it found, and it also tells me that 49 unique values remain in the data set. Let's hit OK. When removing duplicates, keep in mind that Excel is looking for the information that is displayed, not the information that is stored in the cell itself. Let me explain what this means. I'll go back to the Home tab, hit the undo button. So one of the rows of data was John Andrews in row 4 and row 18 that Excel currently identifies as a duplicate entry. So if I just change the format of John Andrews' age on row 4, I'll just put 2 decimal places. Now logically, the age is still the same, but let's see how smart Excel is. If I click on the table again, and I go in the Data tab, and I hit the Remove Duplicates button, I select all the columns, and I hit OK. Let's see what happens. Now this time, Excel only found one duplicate value, which was removed. There are 50 unique values that remain. So according to Excel, this data entry is not the same as this data entry because it also looks at formats which are different in both of these cells. In this module, we discussed how to apply the advanced filter and remove duplication tools in Excel. Remember, when using these tools, Excel is looking for exact matches, and that includes exact matches in formatting. This is very important when we are looking at data sets with numbers and dates. Excel is smart, but not as smart as us. As an end user, we need to ensure that the results that Excel provides us is in line with what we are expecting. The most important thing to do when you have a duplicate record or records in a list is to get rid of them, as you probably saw in the previous module. But sometimes you just need to identify the data attributes, which includes the duplicates in a data set. It might be useful to see the source information together. This list appears to be arranged in a random order. We have the last name, first name, email, start date, age, department, the ID, and the respective salaries of these personnel that are listed over here. Now, we have no idea if there are any duplicates. Let's sort the list. And if you're trying to group duplicate records together, the best field probably is the ID field. You might think that the last name is suitable, but keep in mind that not all people with the same name are the same person, right? So let's sort this list using column D. A quick way to sort this list would be to click on column D, then on the data tab, and then you have a couple of options here, A to Z, Z to A. So Z to A meaning highest to lowest, and A to Z would be lowest to highest. It doesn't matter. Let's just click on this button, and the list is now sorted. Let's go through the list and see if there are any duplicates. So we see a duplicate over here. We have another duplicate over here. And we have another duplicate over here. You can see them right now, but imagine if the data set consisted of thousands of rows of data. Would you want to sift through them then? So let's add a column over here to identify duplicate records. So let me just name this column duplicate records. I will be using an if formula, and using that formula, I will compare this data within the cells to determine if the data is duplicate or unique. I4 is left blank because it's the first row, and after filtering, you can clearly see that there are no duplicates. I'll start with cell I5. I'll begin by typing equal if left parenthesis, and I will compare the data in A4 is equal to A5, and we can even extend the comparison to a number of columns, and all you need to do in that case is to include an and, A and D, before writing your comparative formula, and then it will look like if and A4 equals to A5, then B4 is equal to B5, and I want to extend this all the way to column H. But this becomes very complicated. As you can see, the formula is becoming larger as I extend the analysis to more columns. Then I will check the email address as well. C4 is equal to C5, and then D4 is equal to D5. The formula is already very long, but let's see what happens. I'll close the parenthesis, and then if the value is true, meaning if there is a duplicate record, I will say that you should check. Otherwise, if the data is unique, I will say that those rows of data are okay. Then I'll close this statement by using the right parenthesis and hit enter. And then I'll drag the formula down. So as you can see, there are a number of line items where the data seems to be duplicated. I can identify 4 rows of data which are duplicated. Now the formula is already really long, so I need to make the formula crisp because this is a very long formula. So how can I do that? All I need to do is I will just ask Excel to compare A4 through H4 with A5 through H5, and then I delete the rest of the formula because I've summarized the formula by comparing the row A4 through H4 with A5 through H5, and I hit enter. and then I just drag the formula down, and I get the same result. 4 rows of data need to be checked because they have duplicate records. Now let's say we also want to know how many unique departments do we have. I can either go in this on the filter list and count them, but imagine if you have a much larger data set, that will be very time consuming and prone to error. So what would be a simpler way to just count the unique records in your data set? There is a very simple formula for that. So I'll just show you how to do that using a very interesting Excel formula. It's called unique. So I will just start by typing equals unique, left parenthesis, and then I select the entire array of department and right parenthesis, enter. And as you can see, there are 5 departments within this data set. But this data is not sorted. Let's say we want to sort this data. So I'll just update my formula by typing in sort, S-O-R-T, left parenthesis, and then I'll close the formula by adding a right parenthesis. And then in order to close this particular formula, this is called an array formula because this is a dynamic formula. So in order to close the formula, I need to hit the Control, Shift, and Enter key. And now the data is sorted in alphabetical order. Now let's say I want to count the number of unique records. So how can we do that? So there is another very useful Excel formula called count A. I can use that formula by typing equals COUNT A, and then I select the department section, right parenthesis, enter. There are 53 line items in the department category. And if I want to count the number of unique records, I will just enhance this formula by adding unique, UNIQUE, right parenthesis, enter. So there are 5 unique departments. As I mentioned earlier, these formulas are dynamic. So let's say that we have another new department in this company, and a couple of people from that company are going to move to that department. That department is called R&D. So see what happens. If I type R&D over here, all of a sudden, it also shows up in the list of departments, and the count increases from 5 to 6. So these formulas are extremely useful because they change when the underlying data set changes. In this module, we discussed some very useful Excel formulas to identify duplicates in our dataset. We discussed the compound if statement, unique, and count A formulas. All of these functions can quickly summarize the duplicate data. These functions also help us in quickly determining the most common characteristics in a dataset, such as the number of departments in a company. Before you start working with data, it's very important that you have a look at the data and make sure that it's sensible. If we look at this data set, we do have several fields such as the last name, first name, email, start date, age, department ID, and salary. But if you look closely at the data, you will see quite a few abnormalities. For example, the last name is in lowercase, the first name is in uppercase. There are some strange spaces after the email address and even before the email address. And then the salary field has the numerical value, and then it also specifies that it's in dollars. So this kind of data, for example, where you have numbers and alphabets within one cell, is not very easy to process. So in every cell, ideally have one kind of data. It should either be a number or an alphabet, especially when you look at numerical fields like salary, age, and so on. So how do we go about cleaning this data? First of all, I would like to introduce you to a tool called Find and Replace in Excel. There is a keyboard shortcut for that tool. You just need to hit Control F on your keyboard and you get this pop-up box. So for example, let's start by cleaning up column H, which is the salary field. We want to find dollars, but if you look closely at the data, there is a numerical value, then there is a space, and then dollars. So we need to get rid of the space in between the numerical value and the dollars as well. So if we find space and you spell out dollars exactly the way it's written in the cell, and then you press the replace button here and you replace it with nothing. Just leave it empty and you hit replace all. Excel notifies us and says it's all done. We made 53 replacements. Okay, great. That was quick. So the salary field now looks good. We have numerical values and this data will be easier to process. Now, if we have a look at the name, the last name and the first name, we can use some pretty handy Excel formulas to clean this data up rather quickly. So for the last name, let me just work on a new column and I'll call that last name updated. Let me just expand the column width. And then over here, as the last name is all in lowercase, I can update this column and make this all in uppercase, just like the first name is. The first name is all in uppercase. The last name can all be in uppercase, and then the data will be consistent. So let me just type a formula here, equals upper, left parenthesis, select the cell, right parenthesis, enter. And you just drag the formula down. And just like that, the last name has also been updated and it's all in uppercase. Or what we can also do rather quickly is if we use another Excel formula, which ensures that the first letter is in uppercase and the rest of the letters are in lowercase. And that formula is called proper. So if I just type in equals proper, left parenthesis, I just click first cell, which is A4, right parenthesis, enter, Andrews, and then I just drag the formula down. So this column, we can call this last name proper. Similarly, we can update the first name using the proper formula as well. So let's just see how that works. We use the same logic, equals proper, left parenthesis, click on the cell B4, right parenthesis, enter, as John. You drag the formula down, and that's it. So we have very quickly updated the last name and the first name fields as well. Let's look at how we can clean up the email field. So if we look closely, there are some spaces before and after the email address. We can use the find and replace function here as well. So let's use this column L to update the emails. So what I'll do first is I'll select all the cells within this column that need to be updated. And then I'll hit the Control F key. I just want to find the space and I want to replace it with nothing. Just keep it blank. I'll hit the Replace All key. And there we go. 530 replacements have been made. Now there is another way you can clean up the emails rather than just using the find and replace functionality. So if I just hit undo, go back, all right, we have the spaces again. And I can use a formula called trim. So you start by typing equal, then trim, T-R-I-M, left parenthesis, select the cell you want to trim, right parenthesis, enter. And now the formula has been updated. As you can clearly see, there are no spaces in this email address. I don't want this to be bold, so let me just hit this button. So now we have the email address and I just drag the formula down and all the formulas are also updated and there are no spaces in this email address anymore. But the email addresses usually, they are all in lowercase. But over here, in the email address, we see that the first letter is uppercase, then it's lowercase, and in the last name you have uppercase and then lowercase. So how can we make the entire email address in lowercase? We have a very similar formula in order to make all characters in lowercase. So let me use another column over here. I'll just call it email lower. The formula is very simple. Equal, lower, left parenthesis, you select the cell, right parenthesis, enter. And now the entire email address is in lowercase. Let's drag the formula down. And there we go. Shown you the various formulas and techniques that can be used to clean the data. Once you are satisfied with the results that you want, you can delete the columns that you don't need, such as the last name and the first name over here. Cleaning data is often misunderstood and underestimated. Using the find and replace functionality or the trim, upper, lower, or proper formulas that we have in Excel makes your work a lot easier. This also enables you to process data far more efficiently and effectively. It's now time for an exercise to test our knowledge. In this exercise, we have a list of appliances and we need to use the sort and unique formula combination to find the number of unique subcategories in this list. This is a fairly long list. The sort and unique formula combination can help us to determine the number of unique subcategories. Please pause this video if you do not want to watch the answer right away. So let's determine the number of unique subcategories in the list. We just need to remember what the formula combination for sort and unique looks like. So we'll use column I for that. So we'll begin by typing equals sort and then left parenthesis. And then for the array, I will type in unique. Then there will be another left parenthesis and I'll select the array in question, which is a subcategory. So I'll select the line items in column B. I can use the Control, Shift, and Down key to quickly select the entire array. And that's it. I'll close the unique formula by typing in a right parenthesis. And then I'll close the sort formula by typing in another right parenthesis. So I had two brackets. Both brackets are now closed. I'll press enter and let's see what we get. There we go. These are the unique subcategories based on our list. Now, if we have to count the number of unique subcategories, we will use a formula with the combination of count A and unique. The formula goes something like this: equals count A, left parenthesis, unique, another parenthesis to open the bracket. Then I'll select the subcategory, which is B6 through B761. Right parenthesis to close the first bracket, and then another right parenthesis to close the second bracket. I'll press enter, and there we go. So we have 18 unique subcategories in the list.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get the course exercise files and follow along with this video, click over there. And click over there to watch more videos on YouTube from Simon Sez IT.